Welcome to Considering Speech Language Impairment as part of a comprehensive special education evaluation, Digging Deeper. I'd like to give a shout out to Wisconsin Statewide Parent Educator Initiative, or WISPE, for letting us use their Zoom today. As you know, the new rule went into effect for referrals made on or after August 1st. The official rule is in this, the link here below. And so you can look at it, but we also have a worksheet that we've put together too. And I know that that's usually how most of us interact with the rule. These, I think, are the top resources for people that you could share with administrators or that you can review yourself. The summary of changes to the rule, I think directors probably find that to be the most useful, but I really like it too because it's kind of an overview, right? And then the second document I call the side-by-side, but it's called Revisions to SLI Identification. That's where it has the old rule right next to the new rule. There's also some videos for the speech or language impairment criteria. It's an overview and it's within the context of a comprehensive evaluation. And so there's 4 shorter videos. And I did the specific speech language impairment criteria myself. And other of my colleagues did the other 3 portions. So that's a good foundational video to watch. And then everything that we're doing, you know, we last spring, we did dynamic assessment because that applies to old rule and new rule. We did some speech sound stuff in January that applied to old rule and new rule. And things that we've been doing in August and September are on the Speech and Language Assessment Tools website. It may be a little bit overwhelming if you look at it. I was going to just click on it quick to show you. Bear with me, send me feedback so we can visually arrange it differently, but there's some overview information, there's some speech sound disorders, resources, dynamic assessment, limitations of norm reference tests, rubrics and tools. And so that's what we have so far. And again, you know, it's not in final form. I'm trying to get resources to you as quickly as I can so that you can utilize these resources if you need to. And before I go any further, I just have a bunch of people, and I know I'm leaving people out, and I apologize if, you know, if I don't have you here specifically called out, but these people have done so much collaborating with me over the past year and supporting in the development of support to SLPs in Wisconsin. And I just wanted to take a second and say thank you. This is not just me doing this work. There are many of us coming together to do this work and to think about the research and to think about best practice and to talk with other states and then to go forward. So just wanted to give them a shout out. There are 6 points that we'd like to cover today. First, we're going to gain understanding why the rule change was made. Then we'll address speech language impairment criteria by adopting the comprehensive assessment model. Talked about that before. We'll then compare the new rule and the old rule language. Then we will break into breakout sessions, and you can spend some time in a small group applying the new criteria to 2 student profiles. After we come back together, we'll talk a little bit about the criteria worksheet and how documenting students meet criteria. And then at the end, I just have a few slides about resources and next steps. So why the change? Well, for those of you who've been around for a while, just like I have, the last rule change was in 2003, and it wasn't considered substantive. Like, it wasn't a huge rule change. It was a small rule change. It was actually when 1.75 standard deviations from the mean was put into the rule. And that's actually a really long time ago. And there's been a lot of research, and there's been a shift in best practice since 2003. And so that's why we decided to examine and look at this rule to begin with last year. And so we have two goals with the rule change. We hope that there's more accurate identification of students for services in schools. And we're an effort to be in line with current research and best practice. And if you look at those bullet points under the second bold line, some of the research is older, right? 1994, 2006, and some of it is newer. And so best practice current research, some of this has been around for a while. And more accurate identification of students, including students who are culturally and linguistically diverse, right? A lot of our practices have the potential to be biased against students who are culturally and linguistically diverse. And so the other piece is educational relevance. We can't just say we think that what we're seeing on a test is impacting a student. We think it could impact them. No, we actually have to show how it does impact them. And so that's why we need to do observations in natural environments. It's why we have to document the educational impact. What does it look like? So impact, right? And I just want to underscore that because it is really important. So how does what we're seeing in our assessments impact functional communication? That's why we're doing observations. That's why we're talking with our classroom teachers and caregivers and interviewing them to find out where communication breaks down and why. That's why we're looking at work samples, why language samples can be so helpful, and why intelligibility is an important piece to consider when we're looking at speech language impairment. So now, looking at speech or language impairment, we have to do this within the context of a comprehensive special education evaluation, right? And I think that the best way to do this is to adopt a comprehensive assessment model. And I say this every time I show this slide. This is from Marie Ireland in the Department of Ed in Virginia. I love this model because it shows that there is a place for norm referenced assessments, absolutely, for many kids, but it's 1/4 of the model. There's academic activities we need to look at. There's contextualized tests we should be reviewing student scores on. We need to be employing our speech and language probes, right? Those are just a part of our assessment, but they are very valuable. And then pair those results with our decontextualized tests or norm reference tests. So the decontextualized tests are just 1/4 of the model because they have limitations. And if you did not have a chance to watch John Heilman's Limitations of Norm Reference Tests session, we have the recording posted on the website. So we broke it into a couple of shorter videos, and then he walked through some case studies at the end. So I encourage you to check that out. In a nutshell, just a little bit of information about some of what he shared is that norm reference tests, they vary in their accuracy. Some are more sensitive and specific than others. Many, if not all, assume that all children have had the same experiences and opportunities prior to evaluation, when we know that is not the case, right? These tests often evaluate skills that are more often associated with culture or socioeconomic status, such as vocabulary, rather than a true language impairment. And if you want to get into any of this more, I would encourage you to look at Kate Crowley's Leaders Project website with Columbia University. There's also a really great resource I've shared with many of you previously. The Department of Ed in Virginia often pairs with their university in Virginia, and they did a research grant where they looked at all the different SLP tests, and they talk about the sensitivity, the specificity, the dialect considerations that the test may have, the race, ethnicity of the norming sample. And so this is a really great tool, and I have a link in the presentation for you. If you are into podcasts, I really encourage you to listen to this See, Hear, Speak podcast. Dr. Elena Plant is a leader in our field, and she talks about the limitations of norm reference tests, why we use them, what makes one valid, is more better. I mean, she's amazing. She's incredible. This was actually some foundational work for our work group in developing supports for SLPs. So, specifically students who are English learners, this rule is looking at ensuring that we are more culturally responsive in our assessments. And there are some things that we can do, right? We can try to evaluate English learners in their home language, unless it's not feasible to do so. We can learn how to use translators to obtain case histories so that we have a better idea of the language use at home. And then compare that also with the interviews that we do of school staff, especially the EL teacher, to see how language use is happening across settings. And then dynamic assessment is a very valid tool to use with English learners to determine their modifiability. So if we teach them something, can they easily respond and make progress? And we have a whole set of presentation short videos on the website if you would like to learn more about dynamic assessment. And also Courtney Seidel is going to be presenting this fall, talking about best practices when assessing English learners. So this is a 2020 article too that is, I think, in line with this model called the Converging Evidence Framework. And it says exactly what we've been talking about, that in making your clinical decision, you should take information from all of these areas. Standardized assessments, our observation, a connected speech and language sample, and information from parents, caregivers, teachers, anyone who knows the child. So I was really excited to see that somebody did put this very term on the Jamboard, a difference within diversity. We've been talking about difference versus disorder, but the field is evolving a little bit to difference within diversity. Or disorder within diversity even. So Jana Edding put out in 2018. So we want to make sure that when we are assessing English learners, we're not penalizing them for speaking English as a second language, but we also want to determine what is the difference within their language. So what is not happening, or what are they struggling with within their dialect or within their language? So the second bullet point is all throughout the rule, right? Compared to skills expected for the student's age, culture, language, background, or dialect. So, and this 2018 article by Farouja Bernard is really a great one. I recommend that you read. Students who are bilingual or multilingual and students who use a dialect other than general American English are disproportionately identified as needing special education. So that's true for speech and language as well. So we really need to be careful that we're not wrongly identifying kids. And that is a part of why we shifted the rule. What are the top 4 ways you can make your assessment more culturally relevant? At the review of existing data, ask questions about the whole child, right? Strengths, difficulties. It can be about communication skills. It can be about other things too. Get to know the whole child. Do more than standardized assessments. Start with functional performance and add standardized assessments if needed. A lot of the norm reference tests we have are not normed on students who are bilingual or multilingual, so we need to think about doing something else with our students who are English learners. And really including parent information. We do that for all of our kids, but it's especially important for kids who are culturally and linguistically diverse, because the cultural expectations and the school expectations for behavior and participation are not always matched up. If you are considering using a norm referenced assessment with a student who is English learner, you need to make sure you look at the normative sample of that test to see if the test was normed on that population of kids. And also we should always be looking at test items for potential bias, because there are biased items on our tests.